This is Cultured. I'm back. I'm sure you were wondering, what could possibly pull me out of 3 months of YouTube retirement? Well, the answer is quite simple. 3 words. Kanye, Omari, West. When Kanye returns, so do I. I don't make the rules. The much-anticipated Donda finally arrived last week with a plethora of featured artists, a notable lack of cover art, and enough reverb to make Phil Collins think he's Peter Gabriel. 27 songs is this record, by far the most sizable of Kanye's career, and that's because the path to get here was long and winding. For those of you at home that value your time and live lives of meaning and stuff of that nature, I will attempt to summarize this as concisely as I possibly can, but warning, this is a very long story. The month is October 2019. Kanye had just released his first gospel album, Jesus is King, and vowed to never make secular music again. Just a month later, he got to work on the follow-up, Jesus is King Part 2, with Dr. Dre. That collaboration quickly dissipated, and the project picked up again without Dr. Dre in March of 2020. By June, Kanye announced on Twitter that the forthcoming album would now be known as God's Country. He released a single from it titled Wash Us in the Blood. That single featured Travis Scott. And then on July 4th, 2020, Kanye announces that he's running for president. I know, this feels like 5 years ago, but it just happened last summer. We must now realize the promise of America by trusting God, unifying our vision, and building our future. The tweet read, I am running for president of the United States. Hashtag 2020 vision. Some outlets treated this announcement like legitimate news. Some thought it was just Kanye being crazy on Twitter. Some thought that it was a shadow effort by the Trump campaign to siphon votes from Joe Biden. And some, and these are some of the more discerning folks on the internet, thought it was a calculated publicity stunt to boost album sales. Those people were seemingly vindicated on July 21st when Kanye tweeted out a photo of an iTunes page with the caption, Donda, coming this Friday. Donda being the name of his late mother and the new name of God's Country. Throughout the next week, the album's name would once again change to Donda: with Child, and the world would receive periodic updates on the track list. Many songs that would ultimately make the final cut, including Off the Grid, Hurricane, Keep My Spirit Alive, just to name a few. But needless to say, the July 4th release date passed, and Donda never came. Then Kanye tweeted out some album art, but still, Donda never came. Then the artwork got changed to a painting from French expressionist Louise Bourgeois, and you know the drill. Donda never came. And after several months filled with mental breakdowns, marital problems with Kim Kardashian, hardcore fans like myself had to come to terms with the fact that Donda would join Yandhi, Wolves, So Help Me God, and Watch the Throne 2 in the graveyard of unreleased Kanye albums. But then, in September 2021, whispers began percolating throughout the galaxy. The dead speak! They proclaimed Kanye has resumed work on Donda. By July 18th, he had begun privately sharing the album with friends and famous luminaries, and soon enough, a listening event was scheduled at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta for July 22nd. That night, a colossal crowd packed into the home of the Atlanta Falcons. A few extra million watched live on Apple Music, and they were all there for one reason: to hear the album they'd been promised for over a year. And there was Kanye, sporting a nylon face covering that can only be described as Slender Man chic, and cavorting about to his brand new creation. But to the shrewd ear, something didn't seem right about this event. The mixes, the featured verses, they didn't seem, what's the word for it? Oh, finished. And like Laurie Strode sensing Michael Myers around the corner, us Kanye fans recognized a horrifying feeling. It was happening again. In fact, Donda was not released that night on streaming services. According to reports, producers were still scrambling to get featured artists into the studio. Jay-Z, for example, was brought into the studio the day of the listening event. So as Kanye is wont to do, he tries something incredibly unreasonable, and that is to build a makeshift apartment in Mercedes-Benz Arena, move in, and work on the album day and night until its final completion. Now, If you have ever tried creating anything in your life ever, you know that the lock yourself at a remote location strategy is doomed to fail from the beginning. Ask the Torrance family all about it. Would not recommend. On August the 5th, another listening event is announced. Again, it is set at Mercedes-Benz. Again, it is streamed to Apple Music. And again, Kanye wears a face covering, except this time the choreography is more Cirque du Soleil than before, and the music sounds more complete. Except for the fact, that it's not complete at all. Another album premiere without the premiere of the album. It's at this point when I started getting hip to Kanye's hustle, I began asking myself, how many times can Kanye realistically do this? Sell tickets to a concert he doesn't have to actually perform at under the pretense of a brand new album. How many more tweaks? How many more songs would he have to pack in to keep this road show going? Well, apparently, Kanye had only one more grift left in him. For now, anyway. On August 26th, standing with DaBaby and Marilyn Manson in front of a replica of his childhood home in the middle of Chicago's Soldier Field, Kanye's final listening event for Donda. 3 days later, the album hit streaming services, and finally, our long national nightmare is over. A release that was more dragged out than a pointless war in the Middle East. And even then, according to Kanye, the drop was against his wishes. Whew. So what was all of that for exactly? All those hours spent decoding Instagram stories and downloading leaked MP3s? What did we gain from that work? Well, simply put, an album that's decent. And I suppose decent is about all you could expect out of Kanye West these days, but decent nonetheless it is. There are some standout moments. Jay-Z's verses on Jail, The Weeknd's vocal on Hurricane, the Lauryn Hill sample in Believe What I Say. But there are also some astoundingly bad moments. The opening Donda chant comes to mind. The track God Breathed comes to mind. Tell the Vision featuring the late Pop Smoke certainly comes to mind. But what we have here is a passable collection of pop songs that everyone will enjoy and then everyone will forget about by the time Drake releases Certified Lover Boy. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't. You know it's true. 2 whole years of anticipation for 2 whole days of discourse. Then it's over. Donda has a shorter life cycle than Mike Richards' career as Jeopardy host. Now, perhaps I should be more accustomed to this. The heavy churn of the pop culture meat grinder leaves little time to stop and enjoy any one piece of art. But something about what happened with Donda bothered me. And it's not so much that the album is mediocre. I was prepared for far worse than mediocre. What bothered me is that Donda seemed like the most important thing in the world until it actually came out. Only then did it become disposable. What the hell is that? Well, I don't really know, but I have some theories and I have some other examples. Another major event that happened on the internet last week was the release of the first teaser trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. The trailer featured Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, the return of Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, and several hints at the return of other major characters from the previous Spider-Man films. It was, to be blunt, nostalgia porn. And for people of a certain age, like myself, who grew up with the Sam Raimi trilogy, it was very effective nostalgia porn. No Way Home set the all-time record for the most viewed trailer in its first 24 hours. 355 million views is that new record. The previous record holder was Avengers End Game with 289 million. Both numbers are insanely high. And by the way, well above the number of people that bought a ticket to Endgame or will buy a ticket to Spider-Man. But spend some time on the crazier corners of the internet, like the one that you're on right now, and you'll understand exactly why. Reddit posts about Benedict Cumberbatch's true identity, think pieces about the return of Tobey Maguire, lengthy videos breaking down each Easter egg and fan theory. The internet has built a cottage industry around Disney promotional materials, speculating about the stuff that might be in the movie. Conversations, by the way, that become entirely pointless the moment the movie hits theaters. Once the audience actually sees the damn thing, this conversation will suddenly vanish, and the cultural power surrounding it will also vanish. This model is very confusing to me, and I wanted to go back through history to see if there was any precedent for this, or if this is a uniquely Generation Z phenomenon. So I picked out 2 movies for a case study that I think will illustrate my point. They're not perfect examples, but they're pretty good ones. The first one we'll use is Avengers End Game. That movie made $858 million domestically. That's the second highest grossing movie of all time, only behind Star Wars Episode 7. A lot of people saw it. Of the $858 million, $357 million, or 41%, was made in the first 3 days. That means almost half of the audience saw the movie as soon as they could. And more likely than not, it's because they were fans of the previous movies and had been bombarded with trailers for this one. In its second weekend, Endgame dropped 58% to $147 million. Still a huge number, still good enough for first place, and it took a similar dive the next week to $63 million. Again, still number 1 at the box office. It wasn't until weekend 4 when Endgame was dethroned by John Wick Chapter 3, and then it keeps falling down the list at a fairly steady rate. This is typical of the 21st century American box office. Even the biggest hits burn bright and burn fast. Now, let's contrast those numbers with the movie E.T., which premiered June 11th, 1982. It is still number 7 all time when you adjust for inflation. So it's relatively comparable to the success of Endgame, but drastically different in how it made its money. $359 million is the total gross in 1982, but only 11 million, or 3.2%, was made in its opening weekend. Still good enough for number 1 at the box office, but not anywhere close to the 41% we saw in the opening weekend of Avengers. In its second weekend, the movie actually improves on the first by 6.6%, stays number 1 at the box office. And then the same thing happens in its third weekend. It improves again by 8.9%. E.T. outperforms its opening weekend for 5 straight weeks. That's something Avengers didn't even do once. It then loses the top spot briefly in week 7, retakes the lead in week 8, and then juggles between number 1 and number 2 until October 8th, a full 19 weeks after its opening. The movie then catapults back into the number 1 spot during the holidays, gets there again during the following Easter, that's in April, and is somehow still in the top 10 on May 27th, almost a full year after its initial release. Endgame, on the other hand, was completely out of theaters by week 20. So what was the life of the average moviegoer like in 1982? Maybe you saw a poster or the occasional commercial in between episodes of The Love Boat, but you didn't camp out around the block to snag tickets to E.T. You didn't debate what happened to Elliot's dad, or speculate that E.T. was from the planet Krypton, or freeze frame the trailer to figure out if those were Reese's Pieces or Skittles. You just saw a movie that you heard was good. And then when you liked it, you told other people that it was good. And as the audience grew, so did the conversation. Rather than talking about Endgame for a year before, you talked about E.T. for a year after. The movie was the focal point of the conversation, not speculation about what the movie could have been. Now, when you lay the model out like that, it sounds pretty insane, doesn't it? Every piece of mainstream culture is now a Schrodinger's cat. Its value comes from what is unknown about it. The album, the movie, the thing is no longer the product we're being sold. It's the anticipation that we feel beforehand. In fact, there are some people who watch the live streams of the Donda events who will never actually listen to Donda. And there will be people who loved the trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home who will never watch the movie. And I'm not so sure Kanye West or Kevin Feige gives a rip about those people. And that's cuckoo for freaking Cocoa Puffs, man. It would be like, and I'm just throwing out hypotheticals here, watching the NFL draft and then skipping out on the Super Bowl. Or speculating about where Kevin Durant would land in free agency and then not watching a single Brooklyn Nets game. Or spending months tracking presidential poll numbers and then staying home on election day. Oh wait, people do that. A lot, actually. They soak up as much information as they can about Schrodinger's cat and then immediately lose interest once they find out the cat is dead. So what is responsible for this collective glitch in our brain chemistries? Why do music lovers care so little about the songs? Why do sports fans care so little about the games? Well, the answer I've heard most commonly is short attention spans. Our phones have warped our brains to the point where we're always seeking more stimulation. We're always moving on to the next shiniest thing. And I gotta tell you, this theory does not exactly pass the smell test for me. Go on these Reddit boards, read about how Tom Holland's sports jacket is the same shade of blue as Tobey Maguire's, and tell me these people have a hard time focusing on something. They obviously don't. In fact, the phenomenon I'm talking about here is the exact opposite problem. We love to obsess about pop culture. We love giving it attention. In many ways, the internet has actually increased the capacity of our attention. It encourages us to dig deeper on the things that we love. It's just that what we love is harder to obsess over when it's a tangible thing. Once it actually exists, the possibilities are no longer endless. There's less to theorize about. Culture will always be way more interesting when it's in our own heads. So if you want my theory, here it is. This change in our zeitgeist comes from something that Kanye West knows all about: ego. This is what the public conversation looks like when everyone has a voice in it. When every Zoomer with a TikTok is a music columnist. When every nerd with a webcam is a film critic. And I don't mean that disparagingly, by the way. Look what I'm doing right now. The online meritocracy is a good thing, but it's also fundamentally changed the way audiences interact with culture. It's not just Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert sharing their thoughts on Spider-Man. Everyone gets to do that. And I'll take it one step further. If you can participate in the Schrodinger's cat phase of the discourse, you're not just reacting to the movie, you're actually helping make it. Because remember, until the moment it comes out, the movie exists as a billion different iterations in the audience's head. The cat is both dead and alive at the same time. So if you're the first person to suggest that Benedict Cumberbatch is actually Loki in disguise, you will have written that twist into Spider-Man for everyone who reads your blog post. They will think of your version of the story as the definitive version of the story. And who's to say that you're wrong? The movie isn't out yet. So why watch a basketball game when you can pretend to be the GM? Why listen to an album when you can pretend to be its producer? I suppose you just wouldn't. And I guess that's what I've got to reckon with. A world where everything we're sold is imaginary potential. A world where nothing real will ever last. And a world where the audience can make Donda better than Kanye West ever could. I just gotta ask, because I'm not so sure, do anybody make real shit anymore? This is Cultured. I will be back next week